Good morning.
Good morning.
How are things going today?
It's okay. I'm here. We're together.
It's okay. I know how much you loved him. He told me once that meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to him. This is wonderful. It means so much to me.
Our friendship means everything to me, too.
Sometimes the person everyone ignores is the one carrying the story that can change a life. The rain had been falling for nearly an hour, turning the sidewalks outside St. Mary's Medical Center into long ribbons of reflected light. Cars rolled through the wet streets. Umbrellas drifted past like moving shadows. Nurses hurried through the revolving doors. Families came and went. The city kept moving. Nobody stopped. Near the far end of the hospital entrance, beneath a narrow metal awning that barely blocked the rain, a little girl sat alone on a cold wooden bench. She couldn't have been older than 8. Her small sneakers dangled several inches above the wet pavement. Her blonde hair clung to her cheeks in damp strands. Her hands gripped a worn photograph so tightly that the edges had begun to bend. Tears streamed silently down her face. Not loud sobs, not dramatic cries, just the kind of heartbreak that seemed too heavy for someone so small to carry. People noticed her. They absolutely noticed her. Some glanced in her direction before looking away. Others slowed for a second and then continued toward their destinations. A man in a business suit checked his watch. A woman carrying grocery bags shook her head sympathetically but kept walking. A teenager glanced up from his phone, saw the crying child, and lowered his eyes again. Everyone assumed someone else would help. Someone else would ask questions. Someone else would care. The little girl remained on the bench. Alone. The rain tapped softly against the metal roof above her. Water dripped from the corners in steady streams. The photograph in her hands trembled as another tear landed on its faded surface. She quickly wiped it away with the sleeve of her pink sweatshirt. Then another tear followed. And another. Across the street, sitting beneath the shelter of an aging bus stop, Marcus Reed watched the scene unfold. Most people never looked twice at Marcus. At 42 years old, he had become part of the background of the city. His dark coat was old. His boots were worn from years of walking. A faded backpack rested beside him on the bench. To passing strangers, he looked like someone life had forgotten. Yet Marcus noticed things other people missed. He noticed the woman who left food for stray cats behind the pharmacy every Thursday. He noticed the elderly man who always crossed the street too slowly when the traffic light changed. And now he noticed the little girl. At first, he thought someone would come for her. A mother, a father, a grandparent. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The crowd shifted. The rain grew heavier. Still nobody came. Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Something about the child felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not suspicious. Just wrong. Like a piece of a puzzle sitting where it didn't belong. His eyes drifted toward the photograph clutched against her chest. The image was too far away to make out clearly. But there was something familiar about it. Something that tugged unexpectedly at a memory buried deep inside him. Marcus frowned. He stood slowly. Rain splashed against the sidewalk as he stepped away from the bus stop. Cars hissed through puddles nearby. The little girl never looked up. She simply stared at the photograph and cried. Marcus took another step toward her. Then another. And the moment he finally saw the face inside that faded photograph, the breath caught in his throat. Because the man smiling back from that picture was someone Marcus never expected to see again. Marcus stood motionless in the rain as memories he had not touched in years surfaced without warning. The photograph was old, faded around the edges, and softened by time, but the face was unmistakable. Daniel Harper. Even after all these years, Marcus recognized the gentle smile immediately. A cold breeze swept through the hospital entrance, carrying the scent of rain and wet concrete, yet Marcus barely felt it. His attention remained fixed on the photograph clutched in the little girl's trembling hands. Daniel Harper had once been the kind of man people remembered, not because he was famous, not because he was wealthy, because wherever he went, people seemed to feel safer. Marcus swallowed hard. For a moment, The noise of the city faded into the background. The passing cars, the opening hospital doors, the distant ambulance siren several blocks away. Everything felt strangely far away. The little girl looked down at the photograph again as another tear slid down her cheek. Marcus slowly approached the bench. His boots splashed through shallow puddles. He stopped several feet away, careful not to startle her. Years of hardship had taught him something important. People in pain often needed space before they needed answers. The child never looked up. Her small shoulders shook slightly beneath her sweatshirt. Marcus lowered himself onto the far end of the bench, leaving plenty of distance between them. Rain drummed softly against the metal awning overhead. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus glanced toward the photograph once more. "That is Daniel Harper, isn't it?" he asked gently. The girl's head lifted instantly. Her blue eyes widened with surprise. For the first time since he had seen her, she actually looked at him. "You know my dad?" she whispered. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Her dad. The words settled heavily in the air between them. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "I knew him." The little girl stared at him as if she could not decide whether to believe him. Most adults had ignored her all afternoon. Some had offered quick smiles. Others had avoided eye contact altogether. None of them had recognized the man in the picture. Yet this stranger had known immediately. She looked back down at the photograph. Her fingers brushed across the image carefully, almost protectively. "Everybody keeps telling me to go inside," she said quietly. "But I do not want to." Marcus followed her gaze toward the hospital entrance. Through the glass doors, doctors, nurses, and visitors moved beneath bright lights. The building seemed warm compared to the gray afternoon outside. "Why not?" he asked softly. The girl hesitated. Her lower lip trembled. "Because if I go inside, it becomes real." Marcus did not answer right away. He understood that feeling better than she could possibly know. Sometimes grief arrived all at once. Other times it waited outside the door, giving people one final chance to pretend everything was still the same. The rain continued to fall. The city continued moving around them. Yet on that small bench, time seemed to slow. "What is your name?" Marcus finally asked. "Lily," she answered. "Lily Harper." Marcus nodded. "I am Marcus." Lily studied him carefully. Her eyes drifted to his worn coat, his weathered hands, and the faded backpack resting near his feet. Then she looked back at him. "Were you friends with my dad?" she asked. Marcus exhaled slowly. 1,000 memories flickered through his mind. Long conversations, shared laughter, kindness he had never forgotten. He stared at the photograph once more. The same smile looked back at him from years ago. "Your father helped me when nobody else did," Marcus said quietly. Lily blinked. The tears had not stopped completely, but for the first time since he arrived, she was listening instead of crying. And as the rain continued tapping softly above them, Marcus realized that meeting this little girl was not an accident at all. Lily lowered her eyes to the photograph again, holding it carefully against her chest, as if it were the last fragile piece of something she could not afford to lose. The rain had softened now, becoming a steady mist that drifted across the hospital entrance and blurred the city lights beyond the parking lot. Marcus sat quietly beside her, allowing the silence to settle naturally. He had learned long ago that trust rarely arrived through questions. It arrived through patience. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The distant hum of traffic filled the air. Water trickled along the curb. The revolving hospital doors turned endlessly as visitors came and went. Finally, Lily looked up. "How did my dad help you?" she asked. Marcus stared ahead for a moment before answering. His weathered hands rested on his knees. The old backpack sat at his feet. "About 12 years ago," he said softly, "my life was falling apart." Lily listened carefully. "I had lost my job. I had nowhere permanent to stay. Most days I felt invisible." A faint smile touched his face. "Then one afternoon I met your father." Lily glanced down at the photograph. "What happened?" Marcus exhaled slowly. "I was sitting alone outside a community center. Everybody walked past me. Some people pretended not to see me. Others looked away. Then your father stopped." Lily blinked. The story sounded strangely familiar. "What did he do?" she asked. Marcus chuckled quietly. "Honestly, not much." The little girl frowned in confusion. Marcus pointed gently toward the hospital entrance. "That is the funny thing about kindness. Sometimes people think it has to be something huge. But your father sat down beside me and treated me like I mattered. The rain tapped softly against the metal awning above them. He asked my name. He listened. He remembered things I told him. The next week he came back and remembered them again. Lily stared at him. That helped. Marcus nodded. More than you could imagine. His voice remained calm, but something deeper lingered beneath the words. When people stop seeing you, you start wondering if you have disappeared. Your father made me feel visible again. Lily's fingers tightened around the photograph. Her eyes glistened. That sounds like him. Marcus looked at her. It does. A tiny smile appeared for the first time all afternoon. It was small and fragile, but it was there. Dad always talked to everybody. Marcus smiled back. That sounds exactly right. For a moment, the sadness in Lily's face eased. Then the smile faded. Her eyes drifted toward the hospital windows. Bright lights glowed from several upper floors. Families moved behind the glass. Nurses pushed carts through hallways. Life continued inside while she remained frozen outside. Everybody keeps saying he is gone, she whispered. Marcus did not interrupt. They keep saying I have to be brave. Her voice trembled. I do not want to be brave. Marcus felt his chest tighten. The honesty of the statement hung heavily between them. Lily wiped her eyes. What if I forget him? She asked. What if one day I cannot remember his voice? Marcus turned toward her fully. You will not. She looked unconvinced. How do you know? Marcus glanced at the photograph again. Daniel Harper's smile seemed unchanged despite the years. Because people like your father leave pieces of themselves everywhere. Lily listened quietly. He left some with you, Marcus continued. And with me. And probably with hundreds of people neither of us will ever meet. The little girl looked down at the picture. For the first time, she seemed to consider the possibility. Across the parking lot, a gust of wind stirred the trees lining the hospital grounds. Their leaves shimmered beneath the streetlights. Then, from somewhere behind the hospital doors, a woman suddenly called out a name. Lily. The voice echoed through the entrance plaza. Lily's head snapped upward instantly. Marcus turned toward the sound. And the moment he saw the panic on the approaching woman's face, he knew everything was about to change. The woman rushed across the wet pavement so quickly that she nearly slipped on the rain-soaked sidewalk. Her dark coat flared behind her as she moved through the crowd. Fear filled every movement. Relief followed close behind it. Lily, she called again. Lily. The little girl immediately stood from the bench. The photograph remained pressed tightly against her chest. Mom, she cried. Within seconds, the distance between them disappeared. Her mother dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around her. For several moments, neither of them spoke. They simply held each other beneath the soft rain. The hospital lights reflected across the wet ground around them. Lily buried her face against her mother's shoulder. The woman closed her eyes tightly as if she had been holding her breath for hours and could finally exhale. Marcus quietly looked away, giving them privacy. Around them, people continued walking in and out of the hospital entrance. Yet the reunion seemed to create its own small world amid the noise and motion. After a moment, Lily's mother gently touched her daughter's hair and pulled back enough to examine her face. I have been looking everywhere for you, she whispered. The nurses were worried. I was worried. Lily lowered her eyes. I am sorry. Her mother shook her head immediately. No, sweetheart. Just do not disappear like that again. Then her gaze shifted toward Marcus. For the first time, she seemed to notice him sitting quietly on the far end of the bench. Her expression instantly changed. Confusion appeared first, then caution. She stood slowly and placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. Marcus recognized the look. He had seen it countless times over the years. The look people gave strangers before they knew their story. Mom, Lily said quickly. He knows Dad. The woman blinked. What? Lily pointed toward Marcus. He knew Dad. Her mother studied him carefully. Rain collected on the shoulders of Marcus's old coat. Water dripped from the edge of the awning behind him. He stood slowly, keeping a respectful distance. My name is Marcus Reed, he said gently. Your daughter was sitting alone. We were talking. The woman nodded politely, though uncertainty remained in her eyes. Thank you for staying with her. Marcus simply nodded. Then Lily lifted the photograph. He recognized him. Her voice carried an urgency that had been missing earlier. Right away, the woman looked at the faded picture, then back at Marcus. Something shifted in her expression. You knew Daniel? She asked quietly. Marcus felt the familiar weight of memory return. Yes, he answered. Many years ago. For several seconds the woman stared at him. Rain tapped softly against the hospital awning overhead. Nearby, a shuttle bus pulled up to the curb. Its headlights washed across the pavement before fading again. "I am Sarah Harper," she finally said. Marcus nodded. "It is nice to meet you, Sarah." Sarah looked down at the photograph in Lily's hands. Her fingers brushed the edge of the worn image. A sadness settled over her features. "Daniel talked about helping people all the time," she said softly. "Sometimes complete strangers." Marcus smiled faintly. "That sounds exactly like him." Lily glanced between them. For the first time all afternoon, curiosity had begun replacing some of her grief. "Mom," she said, tugging gently on Sarah's sleeve. "Marcus was telling me about Dad." Sarah looked at her daughter, then back toward Marcus. Something about his calm voice seemed to ease her concern. "You were?" she asked. Marcus nodded. "Your husband helped me through a difficult time." Sarah lowered her eyes briefly. A small tear appeared despite her efforts to remain composed. "That sounds like Daniel too." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. The kind that comes when people are standing near the same memory. Then Lily suddenly held the photograph higher. "Can you tell me more?" she asked. Sarah looked at her daughter. The request seemed to catch her off guard. Marcus expected her to decline. Instead, she glanced toward the hospital entrance, then back at him. Finally she spoke. "The doctors said we may have a long night ahead of us." Her voice softened. Maybe hearing stories about her father would help. Marcus looked at Lily. The little girl's eyes held something he had not seen earlier. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. And as thunder rumbled faintly somewhere beyond the city skyline, Marcus realized that Daniel Harper's story was far from finished. The three of them eventually moved inside the hospital lobby as the rain continued falling beyond the glass walls. Warm air replaced the chill outside. The scent of coffee drifted from a small cafe near the waiting area. Soft conversations echoed through the spacious room. Nurses crossed polished floors. Elevator doors opened and closed. Life moved quietly around them. Sarah led them toward a row of chairs near a large window overlooking the parking lot. Lily sat between them, still holding the photograph carefully in her lap. She seemed calmer now, though traces of sadness remained in her eyes. Marcus noticed how often she looked at the picture, almost as if she feared it might disappear. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Lily turned toward him. "Tell me another story." Marcus smiled softly. "About your dad?" She nodded immediately. Marcus leaned back slightly. His eyes drifted toward the rain streaking across the glass. "Your father had a habit," he said. "He noticed people that everyone else missed." Lily's attention sharpened instantly. Sarah listened too. Marcus continued. "A few months after I met him, I found part-time work at a community center. It was not much. Just enough to get by. One afternoon, there was an elderly man sitting alone outside. Most people walked right past him. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked if he needed anything. But your father noticed." Lily smiled faintly. "What did he do?" Marcus chuckled. "He sat down beside him for nearly an hour. Just talked." Lily asked. "Just talked," Marcus answered. "When he came back inside, I asked why he spent so much time out there." Marcus paused as the memory returned. He could almost hear Daniel's voice again. "Do you know what he told me?" Lily shook her head. "He said everybody is carrying something heavy. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is help them carry it for a little while." The words settled over the small group like a warm blanket. Sarah lowered her eyes. A faint smile touched her lips. "That sounds exactly like Daniel." Marcus nodded. "I never forgot it." Lily stared down at the photograph. Her fingers brushed the corner gently. "Dad used to tell me something like that." Marcus looked at her. "Really?" She nodded. "Whenever somebody at school sat alone, he always told me to go say hello." Sarah laughed quietly through the sadness. "He gave that speech more times than I can count." The sound of her laughter surprised even her. It was brief, but it changed the atmosphere around them. The grief that had weighed down every conversation suddenly felt lighter. Not gone, just easier to carry. A nurse passed nearby and smiled at Lily before continuing down the hallway. Lily watched her disappear around the corner. Then she looked back at Marcus. "Did my dad ever tell you about me?" Marcus hesitated. Sarah glanced toward him curiously. "Actually, Marcus said he did." Lily sat up straighter. "He did." Marcus nodded. "The last time I saw him, he showed me a picture of a little girl with paint all over her hands." Lily's eyes widened. "That was me." Marcus laughed. "I figured that out pretty quickly." Sarah covered her mouth as a genuine smile appeared. She painted the kitchen table that week. Lily groaned. Mom. Marcus laughed again. Your father was proud of that picture. Lily stared at him. Even though I painted the table? Especially because you painted the table, Marcus replied. For the first time all day, Lily laughed. It was small and quiet, but real. The sound seemed to fill the waiting area with something brighter than the overhead lights. Sarah looked away for a moment, blinking. Rapidly as emotion returned to her eyes. She watched her daughter smiling and realized something extraordinary had happened. For hours, grief had consumed every thought. Yet somehow a stranger sitting beside them had given Lily something no doctor, nurse, or counselor had managed to provide that day. He had given her a piece of her father back. And none of them noticed the elderly volunteer, standing several yards away watching the conversation unfold with growing surprise, because unlike Lily and Sarah, she recognized Marcus Reed immediately. The elderly volunteer remained standing near the information desk, her gaze fixed on Marcus as if she had seen a ghost from another life. She wore a light blue volunteer jacket with a hospital badge pinned neatly above her heart. Silver hair framed her face. In one hand, she carried a clipboard. In the other, a paper cup of coffee that she seemed to have forgotten entirely. For several moments, she simply watched. Marcus did not notice. His attention remained on Lily, who was now tracing the edge of the photograph with her fingertip while listening to another memory about her father. The hospital lobby felt quieter than before. Outside, rain continued sliding down the enormous windows. Inside, warm light reflected across polished floors. The tension that had followed Lily all day seemed to be fading little by little. Then the volunteer slowly approached. Her shoes made soft clicking sounds against the tile. Sarah noticed her first. Marcus looked up only when the woman stopped beside their chairs. The moment their eyes met, surprise flashed across both faces. Marcus Reed, the woman asked softly. Marcus stared at her. Recognition arrived a second later. Mrs. Collins? The woman smiled. I knew it was you. Lily looked between them curiously. Sarah did the same. Marcus rose from his chair. I have not seen you in years. Mrs. Collins laughed gently. Neither have I. Her eyes moved across his face as if measuring the years that had passed. You look different. Marcus smiled. I could say the same thing. The volunteer shook her head with amusement. I doubt that. Lily leaned forward. You know Marcus too? Mrs. Collins turned toward her. Know him, she said. Sweetheart, I could never forget him. Marcus immediately looked uncomfortable. Sarah noticed the reaction. Mrs. Collins noticed it too. Still humble, she said. Marcus rubbed the back of his neck. Please do not start. That only made her smile wider. Lily glanced between them. Start what? She asked. Mrs. Collins pulled a nearby chair closer and sat down. The coffee cup remained untouched in her hands. Many years ago, she began, I ran a shelter downtown. Marcus lowered his eyes. He already knew where this was heading. There were families there going through difficult times. Elderly people, veterans, single parents, children. She looked directly at Lily. Marcus volunteered there almost every day. Lily blinked. Volunteered. Mrs. Collins nodded. Every chance he got. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Sarah listened carefully. The woman continued. The funny thing is, Marcus never had much money himself. Most days he was struggling just to get by. But somehow he always found a way to help somebody else. Lily stared at him. Marcus looked away toward the rain-covered windows. Mrs. Collins smiled at the memory. One winter we had a little boy who was terrified of hospitals. Every appointment ended in tears. Lily's attention sharpened. What happened? Mrs. Collins pointed gently toward Marcus. He sat beside that child for hours. Read stories. Played games. Made him laugh. Marcus sighed quietly. It was not a big deal. It was to that boy, Mrs. Collins replied. Her voice softened. And it was not the only time. Sarah watched Marcus carefully now. The image she had formed of him earlier was changing. Not because of anything dramatic. Because of something far rarer. Consistency. Quiet kindness repeated over years. Lily looked down at the photograph in her lap. Then back at Marcus. Something about the stories seemed familiar. Not because she had heard them before. Because they sounded exactly like the stories people told about her father. The realization settled gently inside her. For the first time since the terrible day had begun, she felt something warm beneath the sadness. Not happiness. Not yet. Something steadier. The feeling that maybe her father was still present in ways she had not understood. Outside, The rain finally began to slow. Small drops clung to the glass like scattered diamonds beneath the evening lights. Inside the lobby, Marcus sat quietly while the people around him shared memories he never thought anyone had noticed. And somewhere deep inside, a truth was beginning to emerge that none of them fully understood yet. Daniel Harper had changed Marcus's life years ago, but now Marcus was quietly doing the very same thing for Daniel's daughter. The hospital lobby grew quieter as evening settled across the city. Beyond the tall windows, the rain had almost stopped. Only a few drops remained, sliding slowly down the glass and catching the glow of nearby streetlights. Lily sat with the photograph resting in her lap, while Mrs. Collins continued sharing stories Marcus had never expected anyone to remember. Each story seemed to reveal another small act of kindness that had quietly rippled through other people's lives. Marcus listened with a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. He never liked being the center of attention. Yet what happened next shifted the conversation entirely. A young nurse approached their group, carrying a folder. She stopped beside Sarah and offered a gentle smile. "Mrs. Harper?" Sarah immediately stood. Concern flashed across her face. The nurse's expression softened. "The doctor would like to speak with you for a moment." Lily's shoulders tensed instantly. Marcus noticed it right away. The small sense of comfort she had gained over the past hour seemed to slip away. Sarah knelt beside her daughter. "I will only be gone for a few minutes, sweetheart." Lily nodded, but her fingers tightened around the photograph again. Sarah kissed the top of her head before following the nurse down a nearby hallway. As they disappeared from sight, silence settled over the waiting area. Lily stared toward the corridor long after her mother was gone. Mrs. Collins quietly excused herself to return to her volunteer duties, leaving Marcus and Lily alone once more. The lobby suddenly felt larger. The sounds of distant conversations echoed softly through the open space. A television mounted near the ceiling played silently. Somewhere nearby, a coffee machine hummed. Lily lowered her eyes. "Can I ask you something?" she said after several moments. Marcus nodded. "Of course." She hesitated. "Do you think Dad knew how much people loved him?" The question caught Marcus by surprise. He considered it carefully. "I think he knew some of it," he answered. "But probably not all of it." Lily looked down at the photograph. "I wish I could tell him." Marcus studied her face. The sadness was still there, but something else had appeared beneath it. Regret. The feeling that there were words left unsaid. Marcus understood that feeling well. He leaned forward slightly. "Can I tell you a secret?" Lily glanced up. "What?" Marcus smiled softly. "Most people leave this world without realizing how many lives they touched." Lily listened quietly. "Your father probably never knew that years later, I would still remember conversations we had on a park bench. He probably never imagined I would recognize his picture from across a rainy parking lot." Lily stared at him. Marcus continued. "The strange thing about kindness is that it keeps traveling long after the moment is over." The little girl thought about that. The words seemed to settle deep inside her. Then she looked back at the photograph. "I think Dad would have liked you." Marcus laughed quietly. "I hope so." Lily smiled. Not the fragile smile from earlier. A genuine one. Small but steady. Then something suddenly caught her attention. She turned the photograph over. For the first time all evening, she examined the back carefully. Faded handwriting covered part of the surface. Her eyes widened. "Marcus!" He looked down. "What is it?" Lily held up the photograph. "There is writing." Marcus leaned closer. The ink had faded with age, but several words remained readable beneath the hospital lights. Lily slowly read them aloud. "If you ever feel alone, look for the people who remind you that kindness still exists." Her voice trembled slightly. Marcus froze. He recognized the sentence immediately. Years ago, Daniel Harper had written those exact words inside a notebook and given it to him. During one of the hardest periods of his life. Lily looked up at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Because in that quiet hospital lobby, surrounded by rain-soaked windows and fading evening light, both of them realized the same thing at the exact same moment. Daniel Harper's final lesson had somehow led them directly to each other. For a long moment, neither Marcus nor Lily spoke. The faded photograph rested between them like a bridge connecting two different chapters of the same story. Around them, the hospital continued its quiet rhythm. Elevators opened and closed. Soft footsteps crossed the lobby. Somewhere in the distance, a machine chimed gently. Yet everything seemed quieter now. Lily looked down at the handwritten message again. Her small finger traced each word carefully. "Dad wrote this?" she asked. Marcus nodded slowly. "It sounds exactly like something he would write." Lily smiled through eyes still damp from tears. "He always left notes." Marcus laughed softly. "Really?" She nodded. "Lunch boxes. School books. Sometimes he would hide them where nobody expected." Marcus shook his head with a smile. "That does not surprise me at all." A few minutes later, Sarah returned from the hallway. The moment she saw Lily smiling, she stopped. For a second, she simply stood there. The difference was impossible to miss. Earlier that afternoon, grief had weighed heavily on her daughter. Now there was still sadness, but it no longer stood alone. Something warmer stood beside it. Hope. Sarah approached quietly and sat beside Lily. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Lily immediately showed her the back of the photograph. Sarah read the faded words. Her hand moved to her mouth. Emotion filled her eyes almost instantly. "I forgot he wrote that," she whispered. Marcus watched silently. Sarah stared at the message for several seconds before looking toward him. "You know something?" she said softly. "Daniel used to repeat those words all the time." Marcus smiled. "He told them to me once too." Sarah looked around the lobby. The rain had finally stopped outside. Beyond the windows, clouds were beginning to break apart, revealing small patches of evening sky. "I think you would have been amazed by this," she said. Lily looked up. "By what?" Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "By the fact that years after helping someone, that person showed up exactly when his daughter needed him." Marcus immediately shook his head. "I do not think it worked that way." Sarah tilted her head. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked toward the photograph. "Daniel was the one who showed up, not me." Lily frowned slightly. Marcus smiled. "Think about it. If your father had not been kind all those years ago, I would have walked right past that bench today. I never would have recognized his picture. We never would have met." Sarah's eyes softened. Lily looked down at the photograph again. For the first time, she no longer saw it as a reminder of what she had lost. She saw it as proof of what remained. The people her father had helped. The lives he had touched. The kindness he had left behind. Minutes later, a hospital volunteer switched on a decorative lamp near the waiting area. Warm light spilled across the chairs where they sat. The glow reflected in the windows and softened the edges of the room. Lily leaned gently against her mother's shoulder. She looked tired now, not from crying, from carrying a day far too heavy for someone her age. Sarah wrapped an arm around her and looked at Marcus. "Would you visit us sometime?" she asked quietly. Marcus seemed surprised. "You would want that?" Lily answered before her mother could. "Yes." The certainty in her voice made both adults smile. Marcus looked at the photograph one last time, then at Lily, then at Sarah. Finally he nodded. "I would like that." Outside, the clouds continued to part. A few stars appeared above the city. And inside the hospital lobby, 3 people sat together in the gentle evening light, each understanding the same truth in a different way. Kindness never truly disappears. It simply waits, sometimes for years, until the moment someone needs it most. 6 months later, spring sunlight poured across the city where gray rain clouds had once filled the sky. The trees lining the streets had turned green again. Flower boxes brightened. Sidewalks. The world had moved forward, just as it always did. Yet some things had changed in ways no one could have predicted on that rainy afternoon outside St. Mary's Medical Center. Marcus stood quietly near the edge of a small community park, his hands tucked into the pockets of a clean navy jacket Sarah had insisted he accept as a birthday gift. Children laughed nearby. Dogs chased tennis balls across the grass. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut lawns through the warm afternoon air. Across the park, Lily sat beneath a large oak tree with a sketchbook balanced on her knees. Her blonde hair danced softly in the wind as she concentrated on her drawing. Every few minutes, she glanced toward Marcus and smiled. He smiled back every time. Some friendships arrive slowly. Others seem to appear exactly when they are needed most. The friendship between Marcus and the Harper family felt like both. Since that day at the hospital, Marcus had become a regular part of their lives. Sunday lunches, school art shows, community events, small moments that gradually stopped feeling unusual and started feeling natural. Sarah often joked that Daniel would have approved of the arrangement immediately. Marcus secretly believed she was right. Lily closed her sketchbook and jogged across the grass toward him. She was smiling before she even reached him. "Finished," she announced proudly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Already?" She nodded enthusiastically and handed him the sketchbook. Marcus opened it carefully. For several seconds he said nothing. The drawing showed 3 figures standing beneath a hospital awning during a rainstorm. A little girl sat on a bench holding a photograph. Nearby stood a woman. Beside them was a man wearing an old coat. Rain fell all around them. Yet above the scene, Lily had drawn a break in the clouds where sunlight shined through. Marcus swallowed hard. "This is beautiful," he said quietly. Lily pointed toward the corner of the page. There, written in careful handwriting, was a familiar sentence. "If you ever feel alone, look for the people who remind you that kindness still exists." Marcus stared at the words. The same words that had connected. A grieving daughter and a stranger carrying old memories. The same words that somehow continued connecting people long after they were written. Sarah approached from behind, carrying 3 cups of lemonade. She looked at the drawing and immediately smiled. "Your father would have framed that," she said. Lily beamed. For a moment, all 3 of them stood together beneath the shade of the oak tree. The afternoon sun filtered through the branches overhead, scattering patches of golden light across the grass. No speeches followed. No dramatic revelations. Just a quiet understanding shared between people whose lives had become unexpectedly intertwined. Nearby, a group of children released bright paper pinwheels into the breeze. The colorful wheels spun lazily as they crossed the park. Lily watched them drift away. Then she slipped her hand into her mother's and looked toward Marcus. He returned the look with a small smile. The wind moved gently through the trees. Sunlight shimmered across the pages of the sketchbook. Somewhere above them, birds crossed the clear blue sky. And in that peaceful spring afternoon, it became impossible to tell where one person's kindness had ended and another person's story had begun. Perhaps that was the point all along. The people who change our lives rarely arrive with grand announcements. Sometimes they simply stop walking when everyone else keeps going. Sometimes they sit beside a lonely child. Sometimes they remember a face in an old photograph. And sometimes, years later, their kindness is still quietly growing beneath the sunlight, carried forward by the hearts